The ring was in his pocket when she told him she couldn't do this anymore. Not the long distance. Not the relationship. Not any of it. Idris stood in her apartment doorway holding takeout from the Thai place they both loved, and he watched the woman he had spent 18 months loving tell him that love wasn't enough. The small velvet box in his jacket pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. A question that would now never be asked. A future that was collapsing in real time. "I can't keep doing this," Seraya said. And her voice was steady in that particular way that meant she had been rehearsing this conversation for weeks. "I can't keep being the person who waits, who builds her life around your schedule, who celebrates holidays over video calls and wakes up alone and pretends that this is what I want." He set the food down on the counter very carefully. "Seraya, I'm 33 years old," she continued, and now her voice was starting to crack. "And I have spent 2 years in love with a man I see 4 months out of the year. And I know you're doing everything you can. I know the hybrid arrangement was a compromise. I know you're trying. But trying isn't the same as being here. And I need someone who is here." Before we go any further into this story, if you've been following this journey from part 1, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, and share this with someone who understands that sometimes love requires impossible choices. Your support keeps these stories coming, and I truly appreciate every single one of you. Now let's continue, because what happens next will break your heart before it puts it back together. Idris looked at her for a long moment, at this breathtakingly beautiful woman with luminous caramel brown skin and those large almond-shaped dark brown eyes that were currently doing everything they could not to cry. At the natural voluminous black curls he had learned to help her take care of on the mornings he was actually there. At the woman who had rewritten every assumption he'd ever had about what he was capable of feeling. "Is this what you want?" he asked quietly. "Or is this what you think you're supposed to want?" She flinched like he'd struck her. "That's not fair. None of this is fair," he said, and his voice was raw in a way she had never heard before. "I am in love with you. Entirely. Catastrophically. In a way that has rearranged my entire life. I turned down 3 projects this year because they would have taken me further away for longer. I negotiate every contract around being able to come back to you. I have built my entire professional existence around the fact that you are the center of it. I didn't ask you to do that," she said, and tears were falling now. "I know you didn't. That's the whole point. You have never asked me for anything. Not once. You have been so careful not to need me that I'm not even sure you've let yourself want me." He stopped, took a breath. "So I'm asking you again. Is this what you want? Or are you doing what you always do when you're scared? Leaving before you can be left?" The silence that followed was enormous. "I don't know," she finally whispered. "I don't know anymore." He nodded slowly. Then he did something that surprised them both. He took the small velvet box out of his pocket and set it on the counter between them. He didn't open it. He didn't say anything. He just let it sit there. Seraya stared at it like it was something dangerous. "What is that?" she asked, though they both knew exactly what it was. "It's the question I was going to ask you tonight," Idris said. "Before you decided for both of us that the answer was no." Her hand went to her mouth. "Idris, I'm not asking," he said. "Not like this. Not when you're already halfway out the door. I'm just letting you know that this," he gestured to the box, "is where I was, where I am. And if you want to walk away from that, I can't stop you. But I need you to know what you're walking away from." He picked up his jacket. "I'm going to leave now," he said. "Because if I stay, I'm going to try to convince you, and you need to make this decision without me standing here making it harder." "But Seraya..." He looked at her one more time, and his amber eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You asked me once if I was living like a monk, and I told you I wasn't sure what I was doing. I know now. I was waiting for you. I have been waiting for you since the moment I saw you sitting alone at that table. And I will keep waiting for as long as you need. But I can't make you stay. That has to be your choice." And then he walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like an ending. Seraya stood alone in her apartment, staring at the small velvet box on her counter, and the takeout that was getting cold, and the life she had just blown apart with both hands. She didn't open the box. Not that night. Not the next day. Not the day after that. It sat on her kitchen counter like an accusation, and she moved around it the way you move around something that might explode if you get too close. She went to work. She came home. She ordered food she didn't eat. She ignored 17 phone calls from Naomi and finally answered the 18th. "What did you do?" Naomi said without preamble. "How do you know I did something?" "Because Idris called Dorian, and Dorian called Priya, and Priya called me, and now I'm calling you to ask what the hell happened." Seraya looked at the box on her counter. "I ended it," she said. The silence on the other end of the phone was judgmental in a way only a best friend's silence can be. "Why?" Naomi finally asked. "Because I can't keep doing this. The distance, the waiting, the feeling like I'm living half a life." "So you decided to live no life at all?" "That's not." Seraya stopped. "He had a ring, Naomi. He was going to propose." "I know." "You know?" "Priya told me. He bought it 4 months ago. He was waiting for the right moment." Seraya sat down on her kitchen floor and put her head in her hands. "I can't marry someone who lives in another country 8 months out of the year," she said. "He doesn't live in another country," Naomi said gently. "He works in another country. His home is wherever you are. He's been telling you that for 2 years. You just haven't been listening. It's not enough." "What would be enough, Seraya? What are you actually waiting for? Because from where I'm sitting, you have a man who has reorganized his entire career around you, who flies across an ocean every chance he gets, who looks at you like you invented light, and who was about to promise you forever. And you told him no before he even got the chance to ask. So I'm going to ask you again. What would be enough?" Seraya didn't have an answer. Idris went back to Zurich and didn't call. This was worse, somehow, than if he had called too much. The silence felt like evidence. Proof that she had been right, that he was already moving on, already recalibrating his life around her absence, already learning to live without her the way he had lived before her. Except that wasn't what was happening at all. What was actually happening was that Idris Callum was sitting in his apartment overlooking the Rhine, staring at structural calculations that made no sense, missing meetings, and having the kind of comprehensive emotional breakdown that engineers are not supposed to have. Dorian called him every day. He answered approximately half the time. "You need to fight for her," Dorian said on one of those calls. "I did fight for her," Idris said. "For 2 years. I changed my entire life for her. And she still thinks I'm going to leave. So prove you won't." "How?" "I showed her the ring, Dorian. I laid it all out. I gave her everything except the actual words, and she walked away anyway. What else is there?" "I don't know," Dorian admitted. "But I know you. And I know you don't give up on things. You spent 2 years building a bridge that everyone said was impossible. You made it work because you refused to accept that it couldn't. This is the same thing. This is not a bridge." "No," Dorian agreed. "It's more important than a bridge. So maybe treat it that way." 3 weeks after Idris walked out, Seraya came home from work to find Naomi sitting on her apartment steps. "We're going somewhere," Naomi said. "I'm tired." "I don't care. Get in the car." Seraya knew better than to argue with Naomi in this mood. She got in the car. They drove in silence for 20 minutes, and then Naomi pulled up in front of a building Seraya didn't recognize. "Where are we?" "An architecture firm," Naomi said. "They're looking for a senior interior architect. The position just opened up. It's a huge opportunity. And it's based in Zurich." Seraya stared at her. "What?" "I'm not saying you should take it," Naomi said. "I'm saying you should know it exists. Because here's the thing, Seraya. You have spent the last 3 weeks being angry at Idris for not being here. But you have never once considered that maybe you could be there. I can't just move to Switzerland." "Why not? You're incredible at what you do. You're bilingual. You've been talking for years about wanting to work on international projects. This firm does exactly the kind of sustainable design work you're passionate about. The only reason you're saying no is because you're scared." "Of course I'm scared," Seraya said. "I'd be moving to another country for a man." "No," Naomi corrected. You'd be moving to another country for a career opportunity that happens to also be where the man you love is. That's different. That's you building a life that includes him instead of waiting for him to build one that includes you. Seraya looked at the building. He didn't tell me about this, she said. He doesn't know, Naomi said. I found it, because I love you and I'm tired of watching you be miserable. But what you do with it is up to you. Seraya went to the interview. She told herself she was just exploring options, that it didn't mean anything, that she was simply being thorough and professional and keeping her possibilities open. She was lying to herself, and she knew it. The firm was beautiful. The work was exactly what she wanted to be doing. The lead architect, a sharp, elegant woman named Claudette, looked at Soraya's portfolio and said, "When can you start?" "I haven't decided if I'm taking the position," Seraya said. "Of course you have," Claudette said with a knowing smile. "You decided the moment you walked in here. Now you're just working up the courage to admit it." Seraya flew back home and the small velvet box was still on her counter, exactly where Idris had left it. She finally opened it. The ring was perfect, simple, a single stone on a delicate band, elegant and understated in exactly the way she would have chosen for herself, which meant he knew her, had always known her, had paid attention to every small thing she had ever said or wanted or been. She sat on her kitchen floor and cried for the third time in 3 weeks. Then she called Naomi. "I need you to help me do something incredibly stupid and possibly the bravest thing I've ever done," she said. "Finally," Naomi said. "I thought you'd never ask. If this story has you on the edge of your seat right now, please take a second to comment below and tell me what you think Seraya should do next. Should she go to Zurich? Should she stay? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Now let's continue. Seraya got on a plane to Zurich 5 days later. She didn't tell Idris she was coming. She didn't call ahead. She didn't send a warning. She just got on a plane with one suitcase and the ring box in her pocket and the kind of terrified determination that comes from finally understanding that the scariest thing isn't taking the risk. It's living with the regret of not taking it. She had Dorian's help getting Idris's address. She had Naomi's voice in her head telling her she could do this. She had 2 years of loving someone and being loved by them in return, even when she had been too afraid to fully accept it. It was evening when she arrived. The city was beautiful in that specific European way, old stone and new glass and the river cutting through the middle of it all like a promise. She stood outside his building for 10 minutes trying to catch her breath and convince herself this wasn't insane. Then she went inside. She knocked on his door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she heard footsteps. The door opened. Idris stood there in a t-shirt and jeans, barefoot, his dark wavy hair slightly messy, his amber eyes going wide with shock. "Seraya." "Hi," she said, and her voice shook. He stared at her like she might be a hallucination. "What are you doing here?" "I got a job," she said, "at Troutwine and Associates. I start in 3 weeks. I'm moving to Zurich." He continued to stare at her. "You're moving to Zurich," he repeated slowly, like he needed to hear the words again to believe them. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I have spent 3 weeks without you and it has been the worst 3 weeks of my entire life. Because you were right. I was leaving before I could be left, and I have been doing that my whole life, and I'm tired of it. Because I opened the ring box and it was perfect, and you were perfect, and I was an idiot." She took a shaky breath. "And because Naomi told me that if I didn't get on a plane and fix this, she was going to disown me." A smile started to form at the corner of his mouth. "Naomi said that?" "She said a lot of things. Most of them were about how stupid I was being. She's not wrong." "I know." They looked at each other for a long moment. "I'm sorry," Seraya said, and her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry. You have spent 2 years showing me that you choose me, and I kept waiting for you to prove you wouldn't leave, and I didn't realize that the person who kept leaving was me. Every time things got hard, I pulled away. Every time I got scared, I built a wall. And you stayed anyway. You kept showing up anyway. And I..." Her voice broke. "I should have been braver. I should have trusted you. I should have trusted us." Idris stepped forward and cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "You're here now," he said softly. "I'm here now," she agreed. "You moved across an ocean." "I did. That's pretty brave." She laughed through her tears. "I'm terrified." "I know," he said. "So am I." He kissed her then. The kind of kiss that feels like coming home after a very long time away. The kind that says I missed you and I'm sorry and I love you and please don't ever leave again all at once. She kissed him back with everything she had. 2 years of love and 3 weeks of grief and the enormous relief of finally getting it right. When they finally pulled apart, she reached into her pocket and took out the small velvet box. "You left this at my apartment," she said, handing it to him. He looked at the box, then at her. "Seraya, ask me," she said. "Ask me now, because if you don't, I'm going to ask you, and I think we both know you had this planned first." He laughed. A real laugh, surprised and joyful and everything she loved about him. "Right here? In my doorway. Right here. Right now." He opened the box. The ring caught the light from the hallway. "Will you marry me?" he asked. Simple. Direct. Everything he had always been with her. "Yes," she said. And she was crying again, happy tears this time. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly because of course it did. Because he had always paid attention. Had always known her, sometimes better than she knew herself. "I love you," he said. "I have loved you since the moment you put your hand in mine on that dance floor and trusted me enough to be terrible at dancing together." "I love you too," she said. "And I'm sorry it took me so long to be brave enough to say it the way you deserved to hear it." "You're saying it now," he said. "That's all that matters." He pulled her inside and closed the door, and they stood in his apartment, which would soon be their apartment, and held each other the way people hold on to things they almost lost and will never take for granted again. The wedding was small. They got married 6 months later in the same ballroom where they had first danced together. Priya cried through the entire ceremony. Dorian gave a speech about how he had known from the beginning that they were inevitable. Naomi stood as Saraya's maid of honor and whispered, "I told you so," right before Seraya walked down the aisle. Seraya wore a simple, elegant dress that made her luminous caramel-brown skin glow in the soft light. Her natural voluminous black curls were swept to one side with small white flowers tucked into them. She had never looked more beautiful. Idris wore a suit the color of charcoal, the same shade he had worn the night they met, and when he saw her walking toward him, his amber eyes filled with tears he didn't bother to hide. The vows were short. Seraya promised to be brave, to stay when things got hard, to build a life with him instead of beside him. Idris promised to keep showing up, to keep building bridges, the literal ones and the ones between them, to always make sure she knew she was chosen. They both promised to keep dancing badly together for the rest of their lives. When the ceremony ended and they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, the ballroom erupted in applause. But Seraya barely heard it. She was looking at Idris and he was looking at her, and everything else was just beautiful noise in the background. They spent the first year of their marriage learning how to build a life together in a way they hadn't quite managed before. Seraya thrived at the Zurich firm. Her work was featured in architectural journals. She designed a community center in the city that won awards for sustainable design. She made friends. She learned to love the city, the snow in winter, the flowers in spring, the way the river looked at sunset. Idris finished the Rhine Gorge Bridge. It opened to great acclaim, another impossible thing he had made real through patience and precision and refusal to give up. They argued sometimes. About small things mostly, whose turn it was to do the dishes, whether they were going to spend Christmas in Zurich or fly back to the States, how to arrange the furniture in their apartment. They learned how to fight fair, how to apologize, how to forgive. They also learned how to be happy in the quiet, ordinary moments. Saturday mornings drinking coffee on their small balcony, cooking dinner together and actually getting it right this time, walking along the river at night holding hands, coming home to each other at the end of long days and feeling like the day finally made sense. One evening, almost exactly 2 years after Seraya had shown up at his door with a suitcase and terrified courage, they were sitting on their couch reviewing plans for their next big project. Idris was consulting on a pedestrian bridge in Copenhagen. Seraya was designing the public spaces around it. It was the first time they would officially work together on something. "This is good," Idris said, looking at her sketches. "Really good. You made the space feel like it belongs to the people using it." "That's what I do," she said with a small smile, echoing what she had told him years ago. "I know," he said. He set down the plans and pulled her close. "Can I tell you something?" "Always. I'm really glad you were sitting alone at that wedding." She looked up at him. "Why?" "Because otherwise I wouldn't have had an excuse to walk across that ballroom and say the 4 words that changed my entire life." "Come dance with me," she said softly. "Come dance with me," he agreed. She kissed him. Long and slow and full of the kind of love that doesn't announce itself loudly but shows up consistently, day after day, year after year. "You know what I realized?" she said after a moment. "What?" "We're not terrible at dancing anymore. We've gotten pretty good at it." He smiled, that full, genuine smile that she had been the first person to really see all those years ago. "We have," he said. "But I kind of miss being terrible at it together." "We can be terrible at other things," she offered. "Like what?" "I don't know. Pottery, rock climbing, ballroom dancing, but a different style." He laughed and pulled her closer. "As long as we're terrible at it together," he said. "Always," she promised. And they were. 3 years later, they had their first child. A daughter with her mother's luminous skin and her father's amber eyes. They named her something that meant bridge in a language neither of them spoke but both of them loved, because she was the thing that connected everything they had built into something even more extraordinary. Seraya went back to work after 6 months. Idris negotiated his contracts down to 6 months in the field per year instead of 8. They hired help. They learned to parent the way they had learned to love. Imperfectly, honestly, with a lot of trial and error and the fundamental belief that showing up was more important than getting it right the first time. Their daughter grew up bilingual, bicultural, surrounded by buildings her parents had designed and bridges her father had built. She grew up understanding that love was something you built deliberately, with patience and precision and the willingness to keep trying even when it was hard. When she was 5, they took her to the ballroom where they had gotten married. "This is where Mama and Papa met," Seraya told her. Their daughter looked around at the crystal chandeliers and the ivory and gold. "It's pretty," she said. "It is," Idris agreed. "But it wasn't pretty that made it special." "What made it special?" she asked. He looked at Seraya, and she looked at him, and they both smiled. "The fact that I was brave enough to ask your mama to dance," Idris said. "And I was brave enough to say yes," Seraya added. "Even though you were terrible at it?" their daughter asked, because they had told her this story many times. "Especially because we were terrible at it," Seraya said. Their daughter thought about this for a moment. "Can we dance now?" she asked. So they did. All 3 of them, there in the empty ballroom on a random Tuesday afternoon, with no music playing and no one watching. They danced badly and laughed loudly and held each other close. And it was perfect, because that was the thing about love Seraya had finally learned. It wasn't about perfect timing or perfect circumstances or perfect people. It was about finding someone who would keep showing up, keep trying, keep choosing you even when, especially when, things were hard and messy and imperfect. It was about being brave enough to say yes when someone extended their hand. It was about building something together, one careful choice at a time, until you looked around one day and realized you had created something extraordinary. It was about dancing badly together and calling it beautiful anyway. If this story touched your heart, made you believe in second chances, or reminded you that love is always worth fighting for, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave a comment below telling us your favorite moment from this journey. From the wedding where it all began to the family they built together. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that celebrate real, imperfect, beautiful love. Hit that like button if you believe that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is show up and say yes. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for believing in love stories that don't give up. And we'll see you in the next one.